Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the fourth annual Southern Nevada Youth Homelessness Summit. On behalf of the Nevada Partnership for Homeless Youth and Las Vegas Sands, we appreciate your commitment to attending the Summit 2020 virtual conference series as we continue the movement to end youth homelessness in Southern Nevada. We'd also like to thank our supporting sponsors, the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, Greenspun College of Urban Affairs, and the Las Vegas Review-Journal. This year has certainly been like no other. And in the true spirit of the times, not only are we evolving into a summit format to a virtual conference in response to the pandemic, we're tackling the issues of 2020 head on. Today, we'll address the impact of COVID-19 on youth homelessness in our community. In preparation for our discussion, it's important that we have context for the progress we've made on this journey. The first three summits laid a firm foundation for how our community will address and ultimately solve the issue of youth homelessness by establishing and beginning the work of the Southern Nevada Plan to end youth homelessness. But while the foundation we've laid over the past 3 years is solid, foundations can be shaken. In 2020, they have been shaken. It's our job to ensure our fight remains strong. That's why Summit 2020 is about building resiliency for the issues that have shaken up our norms and asked us to think more creatively, care more deeply, and act more earnestly in how we address our community's most serious issues. As we tackle the impact of COVID-19 on our community's vulnerable youth, I'm imploring everyone, especially my colleagues in the business and philanthropic community, to not leave your involvement simply at conversation. It's imperative that everyone with the means and resources to contribute to this movement determine what role they can and will commit to. We must ensure that young people who have been stripped of their safety nets get the resources they need to stay safe and healthy and continue to move forward during this pandemic. This climate's been tough on our community, tougher than most regions of the country, and we've all seen firsthand the impact it's had on individual lives. I'm proud that our company's been able to support our team members with continued employment during this time. And a community COVID-19 response relief effort, it's included funding, food and supplies, and masks for frontline workers and hygiene kits. We've also been able to continue supporting important community partners and initiatives such as the movement to end youth homelessness. But many have lost jobs, faced precarious housing situations, and had difficulty in maintaining access to needed resources. For youth experiencing homelessness, the problems are greatly compounded with no family support systems in place. It's our collective job to ensure we deliver solutions, not only to address the immediate impact of this environment, but for the long-term impact the pandemic will continue to have on vulnerable youth in our community. We already have one of the nation's highest rates for youth homelessness. More than 1,000 local youth live alone without a home on any given day. We cannot let the pandemic force more youth into homelessness. That's why we're here today. Thank you for your commitment to not only listening, but to taking action. Now, please welcome my friend Arash Ghafouri, Executive Director of the Nevada Partnership for Homeless Youth, who will provide more insights about the impact of COVID-19 on our community's vulnerable youth and introduce our panel discussion. I also want to commend Arash and his team at NPHY for the unshaken commitment and tireless hours they have given to ensure that youth clients remain safe and healthy during the pandemic. Our community can't thank you enough for your efforts. Arash?
Again, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. On behalf of the Movement to End Youth Homelessness in Southern Nevada, thank you to Ron and Sands Cares for your kind words and continued support, dedication, and leadership. This has been beyond a challenging year, yet you all have been there for everyone from your staff to our entire community. From the millions of N95s and dollars pumped into the community to fight COVID, to helping create and elevate platforms to better understand complex issues and drive solutions like today, Sans Cares continues to set the tone for keeping a pulse on our community and doubling down wherever they can, not by just creating platforms, but also by investing directly into solutions. Thank you, Sans Cares. Echoing Ron's sentiments, MPHY has seen firsthand how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected young people experiencing homelessness in our community by creating new problems and exacerbating already difficult circumstances. COVID-19 is complicating young people's housing, employment, education, healthcare, support networks, mental health, access to services, and so much more. It is important to note this is impacting youth that are entering into homelessness. Now, they're having more difficulty finding less readily available resources, like offered in schools or other public areas. And also, youth who have been working hard trying to exit homelessness. What does it look like for a job for them? What does it look like to continue their education? What does it look like for them to even get their own housing? Youth experiencing homelessness are uniquely vulnerable to COVID-19, especially in a world they're experiencing today, where they often do not have a stable living situation or are always on the move, where they lack the ability to self-isolate, where they suffer from comparatively high incidence rates of underlying health conditions, while simultaneously being disconnected from healthcare and other stabilizing and often life-saving systems. They often lack parental or other supportive adults who can help them navigate emergencies or emergency response systems. The support networks that young people rely on have also been heavily strained by COVID-19. Given that these vulnerable youth have had to navigate the mental health difficulties of this virus and its extreme effects on our society, on top of already having to deal and process the intense trauma of the situations that led to their homelessness and life on the streets. Many homeless young people who have been working their way to self-sufficiency also now face new obstacles. Losing their jobs due to COVID-19 business closures, losing support and resources they receive on-site at school. Accordingly, right now more than ever, young people need safety, food, shelter, and care. At the same time, service providers dedicated to vulnerable youth are also experiencing an unparalleled surge in demand, while every day figuring out how to offer our services in the safest manner possible and how to meet young people's ever-changing needs in this constantly shifting landscape of the pandemic. And this is why we're all here today, to hear directly from young people and experts on how we can best support them during this tumultuous time. We couldn't have predicted COVID-19 last year when we met at Summit 19 and what would lead to our discussions this year. Yet the movement to end youth homelessness in Southern Nevada, our community's collective effort to address and end youth homelessness, must adapt to young people's needs as they arise. The movement itself must be flexible and nimble, aware and resilient, pivoting to address issues most affecting our young people. This is why we're focusing this year's summit on the most pressing issues affecting young people experiencing homelessness today: 2020's dual pandemics, COVID-19, and systemic racism. The work we're doing today on COVID-19 is rooted in the guiding vision of the Southern Nevada Plan to End Youth Homelessness. As the COVID-19 crisis has created new and heightened barriers for young people who are already working to transition out of homelessness, and is threatening to push even more young people into homelessness as a result of the severe economic effects of the pandemic, especially here in Southern Nevada. Doing the work to meet our young people's needs during this time is absolutely crucial to working toward our vision, to making youth homelessness rare, brief, one-time, and equitably addressed here in Southern Nevada. During today's roundtable, we'll be hearing questions submitted by community partners, including elected officials, partner agencies, medical and public health providers, business owners, and even musicians, to our young leaders and experts. Thank you to all of you who submitted diverse and thoughtful questions. We wish we would have had time to feature them all today, but please check out our Facebook discussion group if you'd like to see the additional questions that were submitted. Today's panel is made up of 4 young leaders with lived experience of homelessness: Teresa Butler, Tyson Hall, Tavon Jenkins, and Heather Pummel, and University of Nevada, Las Vegas Assistant Professor of Social Work, Dr. Nicholas Barr. I've been lucky to work with and get to know each of the panelists over the past several years, and they're all passionate and insightful advocates. I can't wait to see what you all have to say today. Thank you for your time and willingness to share with us. Our panel will be moderated by Yori Berry Harris, the Director of Partnerships at the National Network for Youth. Yori oversees the National Youth Advisory Council to educate policymakers, service providers, and community officials about youth and young adult homelessness in America and advocates for solutions. Nominated in 2019 by Governor Larry Hogan to serve on the Children's Justice Act Committee, she is a passionate youth advocate committed to elevating the voices of young people across the globe. She has also had a decade of combined youth development, project management, program design, and organizational oversight experience in both the public and private sectors. We're very excited to have her moderating today's panel. Yori, thank you so much for your time and guidance. For anyone who'd like to learn or to earn social work CEUs from this panel, we will be providing a link to the survey in the chat box at the end of the panel today that you will need to fill out in order to obtain 2 hours of CEUs for today's panel. Please stay until the end and be sure to fill out the survey that we will link to the chat. Thank you everyone who has chosen to join us today. We look forward to your insights, further questions, and responses to this roundtable in the chat box today, as well as on the Summit's Facebook discussion group board. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Yori to get us started.
Thank you, Arash. I'm excited to share this moment with each of you, especially the bodacious and dynamic young leaders who are joining us today, who are brave enough to share their stories and experiences to help propel us higher and push the movement to end youth homelessness forward. Before we jump into the panel, let's get to know the panelists. We're going to start with Tyzakin, Tavon, Teresa, Heather, and Dr. Nick. Introduce yourselves.
I'm muted. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tyzakin Hall. My pronouns are she, her. I'm 21 years old. I am a former client in NPHY. I graduated from their independent living program. I moved into my apartment during the pandemic, so that's super fun for me. I am a member of the Southern Nevada Youth Action Board, Young Adults in Charge, or YAC. I'm an ambassador for NPHY's Ambassador Program and a 2020 True Colors Fellow. I also like to sing, so I'm pursuing a music career with that.
Tavon.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Tavon Jenkins. My preferred pronouns is he and his. I'm an official NPHY ambassador, and I'm also an NPHY graduate like Ty. Let me see. A fun fact about me is I love to collect comic books, and I build stuff with my Legos.
Thank you, Teresa.
My name is Teresa Butler. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am 22 years old, and this is my third year at the Summit. For those who do not know, I'm a Young Adult in Charge member, Hope Scholar, and a student at UNLV studying urban studies. And my fun fact is I'm graduating in May.
Thank you, Heather.
I'm a former client of NPHY. And fun fact about me is I plan to go to med school after obtaining my Bachelor's of Science in Nursing.
Thank you, Heather. Dr. Nick.
Hello, good morning. My name is Nick Barr. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Social Work at UNLV. And my research interests are really about how risk and resilience factors intersect with traumatic experiences to influence mental and behavioral health outcomes, particularly among youth and young adults who experience homelessness. And before I became a professor, I was a clinician with the LA County Department of Mental Health and then in private practice in Los Angeles.
Thank you, everyone. We are beyond excited to hear more from each of our panelists today. Many of you submitted questions in advance for the panelists, and we're going to go to the first question, which comes to us from Monica Gresser of Brazen Architecture. Monica asked, the pandemic created new restrictions, closed schools, and access to classroom learning and libraries. How are you accessing services, food, rest, or washrooms in a safe place to sleep and or study? We'd like to thank you for this question, Monica. And Heather, if you could kick us off by sharing the impact and any of the new restrictions the pandemic has had on you.
Well, due to the pandemic, I have been unable to get Wi-Fi set up at my apartment. So that forces me to seek alternative sources. such as going to the library on campus. Even so, it remains difficult due to reduced operating hours and being closed on weekends, but I have persevered and maintained straight A's in all my courses.
How about you, Teresa?
So when the pandemic hit, it was during the spring semester, and I was taking geology, was online, was kind of difficult class for me. So I would do it in the library, but when the pandemic hit, it closed down the library. So I ultimately had to like drop that class, which was very unfortunate. But thankfully, when the school opened up again, library opened up even with reduced hours, and still be able to like do better in this semester, thankfully.
Thank you. Tavon, do you want to add anything?
And he's telling me how it's stressful for him to get into school because they can't do face to face, and it's more difficult for him to do his FAFSA because the mail's backed up. And it's just I guess I don't know. I guess that's really it for me.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Nevada System of Higher Education, Chancellor Melody Rose. Chancellor Rose submitted a video question. Let's go ahead and play that now.
Hi, I'm Melody Rose, Chancellor of the Nevada System of Higher Education. I want to thank Nevada Partnership for Homeless Youth for hosting this forum and allowing me to ask you all a question. In terms of your educational needs, how have you been able or unable to overcome the technical complexities of receiving an education during COVID-19? Whether that pertains to having access to a computer or a Chromebook or access to the internet.
Great question. Let's get started with Heather.
Well, I've been homeschooled since the second grade all the way through high school, and so I'm used to the technical complexities, but 2020 has taught me patience because I realize that my peers will not catch up as fast as I will with the platform, so I have to be more compassionate and patient in order to try to help them move forward, because with group projects, it is really a team effort.
Thank you, Heather. Teresa, when we were speaking earlier, I know you wanted to respond to this one.
Yes, very much so. Being on campus, living on campus, I had like good access to Wi-Fi, but during my summer class, I unfortunately ruined my laptop and had to get a second one, or needed another one to finish my class. And I had an appointment set up to pick one up from UNLV, but due to circumstances, I wasn't able to meet that appointment, so I asked for another one, and I have yet to hear back from them. And if I did not have my grandma to offer me like a laptop to finish off my class, I would have once again failed another class and been sent back tremendously. So I want to shout out to my grandma for helping me out during that time, because I felt like UNLV failed me at that moment just because I couldn't get a second appointment.
Thank you both for sharing. The next question comes from Clark County Commissioner Justin Jones. Commissioner Jones submitted a video question. Let's go ahead and play that now.
Hi, this is Clark County Commissioner Justin Jones. Very happy to be with you today. My question is, how did the pandemic affect your progress toward becoming permanently housed?
Thank you for that question. Anyone who wants to respond?
I would like to. I am so grateful to live on campus thanks to Hope Scholars, but because how the school had to shut down, and because basically the whole city had to shut down, it was very unclear about if that's going to be a possibility moving forward. And that unknown was very stressful. But thankfully, Hope Scholars were able to make it happen for us. But even then, going to work was scary too, because I didn't know if I would be able to have that. But there has been accommodations. But still, like with COVID getting worse, there's still a lot of unknowns and worry, and it's just kind of scary at the time.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else?
Like going to work was
I also have an answer to this question. I was already on track to getting permanently housed. If anything, it just made the process a lot more stressful. There were a lot of things that I had to move up, like putting down my deposit and then calling constantly leading up to my move-in date to make sure it was still okay and safe for me to move in. And then it kind of took away the celebratory factor of being permanently housed. Like I moved in and didn't feel anything at all. And I still don't feel stable really. As Teresa said, the uncertainty of the pandemic, like I feel like this accomplishment can easily be taken away from me just as soon as I got it.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to add anything to that question?
So actually, I think maybe I could just talk a little bit, or just reflect on some of my experience teaching during this pandemic. So I'm teaching master students in the School of Social Work, and I've taught both online and online and in person. And I think, for the most part, the students are doing really well, but the overall burden of stress and worry is just much, much higher. I mean, even our students who are really putting on a brave front, I think they're operating with very little kind of wiggle room in terms of their stress load. And I don't know, maybe that's reflected among the folks here who are studying. I mean, I think all of us who are teaching and kind of on the admin service provider side, I know many of us have this in mind already, but we really, really need to be much more compassionate and flexible in terms of support, timing, content delivery, the method we deliver content, and deadlines. I mean, it's not reasonable in this context to expect people to adhere to, rigid deadlines and so, I think that's, from my perspective, teaching. It's tricky. We have to adjust on the fly, but it's something we need to really think about doing.
Thank you, Dr. Nick. Tavon, we lost you for a second, but we're glad you're back. I mean, hey, technology in the age of COVID, right? The question that we're responding to, and feel free if you want to add comments to it. If not, no worries. We can go to the next one. But we're talking about how the pandemic affected your progress in becoming permanently housed.
Well, like Ty, I was actually, I kind of moved during the pandemic, so it's actually kind of funny. So I had to lift all my stuff by myself. And, I don't know if you guys know this, but lifting beds and, boxes while you're wearing a mask is not the most comfortable thing. So I guess, yeah, the moving process is more stressful. But besides that, I mean, I'm glad I had the experience, I guess.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that. And thank you all for contributing to that question. So the Las Vegas Metro Chamber of Commerce submitted a question that builds upon our last question, wanting to know how the pandemic has affected your employment status. I know you all will have some great input here. So Teresa, if you want to jump in, we can kind of just keep it going.
It just made things uncertain. I remember emailing my employer, who's the director on campus, and he was just like, "Well, we can't come into work, so just wait and see," type thing. And as someone who's trying to get out of survival mode, who is trying to like just make it happen for myself, I cannot just wait and see. Like I need concrete answers, and nowhere. And it's so. And I felt so unfair for demanding that when the whole world doesn't have answers themselves. So it was just once again just a scary moment. But I'm so grateful that they made it happen. So shout out to Dr. Stream and the people at School of Public Policy and Leadership, because they really cared about me and made sure that things were going good for me as well.
Thank you for sharing, and I'm glad you had that experience. Tysican, if you want to add.
Of course, Teresa. Oh my God, I definitely relate to the survival mode thing. Like as soon as you start to get out of it, then, oh my God, we're in a pandemic, and now it's just reinforced, if anything. That's, oh my God, it's crazy. I think one of the things that I kind of lost in the pandemic was my access to vocal lessons. I would sing a lot in NPHY's drop-in center every Tuesday when the vocal teacher, the vocal coach would come, and we would just sing the whole time, and that really, I didn't realize how much it benefited me mentally, but to not have that, and I mean, I still sing, but it's different. It's not the same as kind of getting to bounce off those techniques with somebody. So losing that has been not great. I feel almost like lost in a sense because like I don't have access to a lot of things. All of our meetings are virtual now, so it's a completely different connection having to build that with people online through the screen, which I'm sure most people here can relate to.
Thank you for sharing. Heather, I don't know if you want to say a little bit about the impact of the pandemic on your employment situation.
Oh, yeah, it's really a pain to try to get a call back when you apply for jobs. You know, they space you out months and months ahead, and you feel like you're never going to get employed, and the rent's coming due, you know. So now I've finally been able to get calls back, but it's been several months of applying for several jobs, not getting approved for it, and not even getting calls back. So the pandemic has really affected that.
Thank you for sharing. Our next question comes.
I'm sorry, can I?
Oh, yeah.
Oh no, you go ahead. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Who's gonna go, me or you? Okay. Well, thank you for asking. And so for me, it affected me in a way of so I'm at high risk. I'm an asthmatic. Anybody who knows me knows, you know, I'm asthmatic. So for me, I got a security job right before this whole thing started. And I remember the hiring process was brutal. We had to do this athletic test, which I do not recommend to nobody if you like your life. And I just remembered how I had to go through that whole month hiring process. And when I got to the end, you know, the pandemic officially started. So my doctor calls me. She asked me, am I working? I told her yes. I told her my job. I told her how there was a little outbreak in her job. And, you know, I was kind of not forced, but due to my health, it wasn't a good idea for me to work there with my underlying conditions. So I was forced to let my job go. And I just recently got hired again. And I was like, so I've been kind of unemployed for 4 months. So, you know, the job search is really stressful, but you know, I got through it, so that's all that matters.
Thank you, Tavon, for adding that. And we definitely wish you and everyone else, right? Because it has been a struggle for many, not just in employment, but definitely employment. I don't want to get in trouble, right, for not allowing anybody else to speak. So Dr. Nick, I don't know if you have anything to add just in terms of like the employment challenges, whether it's what you've seen among staff at the university or even some of your students.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to get on my social work lefty soapbox here for a second. And, you know, let me just say, I think my co-panelists up here have done a really good job articulating what it's like to experience the uncertainty of unemployment after you have worked so hard to build a life for yourself. I mean, I think all of our panelists up here have done a really good job explaining that. So let me just, you know, from my perspective, make sure that we also understand that unemployment, especially during this unprecedented, sorry to use that term, time, it's not an individual problem and individual responsibility. It shouldn't be. I mean, this is the wealthiest country on the face of the earth, and it makes no sense at all that we expect vulnerable individuals who've demonstrated how hard they're willing to work for themselves to just fend for themselves alone. I mean, where is the unemployment support? Where is the federal intervention? It just makes no sense at all. So I think, you know, if we're serious about helping folks who are demonstrably interested in helping themselves with all this grit and talent, we need to make some serious systemic changes. You know, it's not an individual problem. It is a systemic social problem. And it reflects all the other systemic social problems we have, like racism and social justice. And so we as service providers, as local officials, as state leaders, and as federal leaders need to get serious and support these young people.
Thank you, Dr. Nick. I echo everything that you're saying. If there's no better time like now to get serious about supporting our young people, spot on. We're gonna go to a question from Pam Douglas of the Nevada Health Centers. Pam submitted a video question, so if you could play that.
Hi, I'm Pamela Douglas, the nurse practitioner for Nevada Health Center's mobile medical van. We would like to thank you, MPHY, and all the youth we see on mobile medical for allowing Nevada Health Centers and our team to care for you. What services did you lose that have had the biggest impact on your daily life?
Hey, Van, I'm coming to you.
I'm glad you asked. So for me, I feel like I was asked to do some really unrealistic things when the pandemic first hit. For example, I couldn't go to my doctor's office because they told me I shouldn't take the bus. I can't go to the grocery store, so I can't eat. So for me, I was literally just sitting in my house all day, just watching white walls and a cricket bounce across it. And so it put me in a weird spot where I'm hungry, I can't eat. I'm down to my last couple bits of medicine, and when it first started, we couldn't do our doctor's appointments online. So I was out of asthma medicine for, I believe, the first 6 weeks. So I had to just literally just sit there and hope I don't have an asthma attack, or I had no other choice but to go to the hospital while a pandemic is happening. So I wouldn't have reached the best of services. So for me personally, it was a living hell when it first started. And, I'm glad it's kind of better.
Thank you for sharing, Tavon. Teresa, do you want to add anything?
Yeah. Living on campus. Well, first of all, I want to talk about the drop-in center at MPHY. I didn't realize how much that was a safe place for me until it was gone. Like, I miss going to YAG and hanging out with my friends and just like connecting with them. Because we do virtually now, but it's not the same because when we're in person, it just felt like our minds were just like all in one, and it was just like a beautiful moment. It was always safe. We always had fun. Like, we always had like everything. It was just everything. And they took it away, and it just like left a hole in my heart. And honestly, things have not been the same for me since. But also living on campus, I didn't realize how much I ventured out, and like how much I used the library, and how much I went to the student union, and how much I went to like interact with people until that was all gone. Because there's no reason for me to leave my room now, unless it's like for food or to get water. And so it made me kind of stir crazy, and like now I have to be very intentional about like what I do, because there's no other reasons for me like to leave, if that makes sense. So it's the hard part, just being intentional, because it's so easy just to like, well, I'm gonna be in my room all day, so I just lay down and not do anything, and like I want to just forget that this is happening. So you just have to be very mindful during this time.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to add?
Okay, no else want to add. Yeah, I feel you with that. Like you don't realize what you got until someone strips it away. Like, I remember that bachelor meetings, we were laughing, we were having fun, we were joking about each other. Somebody, and I miss that. I miss human contact. I'm all in my house by myself, doing nothing but playing the PlayStation all day. Like, that gets boring after a while. Like, I just miss going outside, walking without a mask. I miss playing basketball, playing football, lifting weights, and I really miss all that. And I wish I could get it back. I wish I could just time travel 3 years ahead and hope the pandemic is over then, and get back to my normal life.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, it is a difficult time, right? Especially the isolation, especially if you're alone, because everyone doesn't have the luxury of living with roommates or family or having friends nearby. So thank you for just highlighting that. Listen, waking up every day and making it through every day in the middle of the pandemic that we're in, that is success, right? Anyone else have anything to add before we go to the next question?
Yeah. Go ahead.
To echo what, oh, I'm so sorry. I kind of just wanted to echo what Teresa and Tavon said. That interpersonal connection is something that we so easily take for granted, even when we think that we don't. Now, the absence of that is so, like, I mean, I can't imagine I mean, I can, but to the extent the detrimental effects that this is going to have collectively on our mental health, it's just, like, it's almost unfathomable because, I mean, I'm going stir crazy, and I can physically go to work now, but like going to work is not the same as me getting to be in an ambassador meeting or in a YAC meeting, or just because I like to bother people in person, and I can text people, but they can ignore me that way. Like if I'm in your face and I'm bothering you, it's totally different. For me, like just through a screen, it's so different, and I don't like it.
Thank you. I know you had something to add.
Oh, they stole the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, in-person interaction really is taken for granted. And despite being homeschooled, my first semester of college was in person, and I really missed that. So I can't wait until this pandemic is over and we can go back to campus and I can interact with the teachers and my peers in person and, have that interaction.
Thank you. We heard a lot, right, of what was coming out, just talking about the lack of social interaction. Tavon, you spoke to, just the physical, right, the impact of the pandemic on your body. We kind of hear about different things. Dr. Nick, do you want to say anything just in terms of like the mental health impact, right? Because it's something that will just nag at you and can be, a lot of people are really struggling and have been struggling during this time. So do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think we know from decades and decades of research that social support and social connection is critical for sustaining mental health and reducing stress. I mean, it's just a multidisciplinary topic of interest, and it's a certainty. Human beings need social support to function at an optimal level. And so if you don't have that social support and you add that onto other stress burdens, so stress can be understood as cumulative, right? I mean, the more stressors you have, the more impactful they are on your mental health and well-being. So if you already have stressors, you're trying to maintain employment, you're trying to study, you're trying perhaps to cope with previous traumatic experiences, you're trying to kind of construct a self-identity, all of those things, and then you lose your employment, you lose your social support network, you lose other things that you've come to count on to maintain your mental health and well-being. It's going to be much more consequential than it might be for people who don't have those other stressors, okay? And we've seen that borne out in the evidence that we do have thus far. The rates of depression are going up. There's some evidence that perhaps risk for suicide is going up. So it's very, very serious. And I don't think that we have yet good answers for how we're going to relieve this cumulative stress burden for folks like young adults experiencing homelessness who are already dealing with multiple other stressors.
Thank you, Dr. Nick. And you talk about not having good answers on how to address many of the challenges that we're facing. But the reality is that's what we need to be doing. And as leaders, as organizations, not just for the young people who are speaking about their experiences, but in collaboration with them. And I feel like this goes to our next question, which was submitted by Orlando Roybal of Point Source Youth. The question asks, how can service agencies better support youth as we enter what seems to be the second round of COVID-19 pandemic, of the COVID-19 pandemic? So this first round, we got a lot of things wrong, right? Hearing from the young people, I'd love to hear from you what you wish organizations and leaders might think about this time that perhaps they didn't think about before.
Hi. It's so funny that the question has second round in it, because I feel like we're still in the first round and it just hasn't stopped. I think one of the ways that communities have failed is not including youth in the decisions that they're making on behalf of youth. I mean, I understand if none of us know what to do because it's a modern day pandemic. We don't know what's happening. But to quote unquote try to protect the youth by not telling us or being transparent with us on what's happening, and instead just being like, we're doing this now, we're going to go ahead and do this now. That doesn't help us. That doesn't help us at all. Like, you have to include us in those decisions before you make the decision and not after the fact, because if anything, it's just causing more damage. So I would say, meet us where we're at, get our input, and then follow through with that.
Thank you for that important note. Anyone else want to add anything?
Well, like I said, I mean, I don't think we're in round two. I really don't, sadly. Um, what I think where we messed up at is we try to get a one size fit all blanket to cover everybody, but that's not realistic. Everybody in this panel right now, we're not the same person. Some people might love to stay at home. Some people might love to go hiking. We don't know. So it needs to be an adjustable plan for all types of people. Like for people with underlying conditions, like with asthma, why isn't there a service where you can have your groceries delivered to you? Why isn't there a service where you can have your medicine delivered to you? It's just things like that. We just need to actually think about other people and try to hit all everybody's priorities and not just say everybody stay home. That's not realistic. We need to meet people, like Ty said.
Thank you both. Anyone else to add to that?
Well, I mean, look, I think while we're still kind of struggling to adjust, now, I'm not a service provider here in Nogales, so I think the service providers and the youth are much more knowledgeable about the particulars of the systems here. I just want to make that clear. I'm a researcher and a clinician. But I will say that, we know from pilot programs in other states that kind of two things work. So one is using available housing stock, including perhaps vacant hotel rooms, to guarantee housing to unhoused people. And the other is direct cash transfers. If we're not sure how to, provide services in an adequate way, provide direct cash transfers to young people who experience homelessness because they know how to take care of themselves with that money.
Thank you, Dr. Nick. Anyone else before we move on?
Yeah, to respond to what you said, I didn't know we was doing no direct cash, transfers. What state do I need to move to get a piece of that?
Yeah, so there are a couple pilot programs in Los Angeles. I think there's also one in Arizona, but the outcomes have been good so far. I mean, let's put it this way: would you guys feel as if you would be able to meet those unmet housing and economic needs if you had, for example, an extra $1,500 a month? What would that do to decrease your anxiety around housing, employment, and school? Like,
To answer your question, I wouldn't be here if I had an extra $1,500 a month. So yeah, I feel like it would really help.
$1,500 a month.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Nick. I mean, I really hope that the attendees who are engaged right now, I mean, what you're proposing, it is happening in some places, right? And I think that as we're facing things, this is new. We've never seen anything like this, especially not in our lifetimes, happening. So I think it really is an invitation and an opportunity for leaders, for organizations, one, to partner with each other, but then to think about how can we innovate to really effectively respond to the needs that are happening right now. We're going to go to the next question, which comes from Clark County Commissioner Lawrence Weekly. Commissioner Weekly submitted a video question, so let's go ahead and play that right now.
What's up, everybody? I am Clark County Commissioner Lawrence Weekly, represent District D here in Southern Nevada. Listen, want to thank my friend Rosh over at Nevada Partnership for Homeless Youth for including me in this opportunity. I'm so passionate about our youth. I'm so extremely passionate, especially with foster youth and homeless youth, and anything that we can do to improve your quality of life and make it better. That's what we're here for. But I want to ask you all a quick question here. So with us dealing with the pandemic all around the nation, right? Global pandemic. Right here in America, millions upon millions of dollars have been allocated to local governments. I'd like to know from you all, what would you say to an elected official like myself or my colleagues as we look at trying to spend these COVID cares dollars, what would it do to help improve your life? What would it do to change the trajectory in your life? What is it that we could do to help you? If you had an opportunity to ask one of your elected officials an up close and personal question on how to spend the money, what would you say? That's my question for you. I'm waiting for your answer.
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Weekly. I hope you're watching right now because we're about to give you some answers. Teresa, we'll start with you. What would you say?
We have time, so let's go into this. So in 2019, we have offered 229 beds for youth, which only satisfied 19% of the need. So knowing this and knowing that we have money, it kind of honestly makes me kind of upset that this is still not happening. Because even this was 2019, going into 2020, half like the 229 beds were at half. So what is we have all this money, so why is not why I can't I'm slipping on my words because I'm just very passionate about this. But my point is that there is a need and we have money for it, but it's not being satisfied. And it's disappointing because we have all these youth who are able to be on the boards and make this happen, but it's not. So this question just shows that there are no excuses, and us being here shows that there are no excuses, but it's not being done. But ultimately, to answer your question, the money could go to shelters, could go to advocates to be on the board to make sure things are being done and that are adequately addressed. And it also I have notes. Sorry, guys. So, but that's my biggest point. Is that we have youth who are more than able to make things happen, but we're not getting paid, so we could have free time to make it happen. So that's will be a good point. We also have the schools to worry about, shelters, and it's just obviously the money is just not going to youth's hands, and that just needs to happen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Tyson, if you want to add anything.
Of course, I definitely agree with that. I think there's been so much focus on prevention. And while that's incredibly important, there are still way too many youth that are currently in a homeless situation, and money needs to go to those youth as well. In terms of expanding existing resources, creating new out-of-the-box resources that we haven't tried yet. We have all of this money now. Like, we should be able to, as Teresa said, there's no excuse as to why we're not doing it. Prevention is important, but there needs to be a balance for those that are currently experiencing. And how can we support them now so that they can be permanently and stably housed as quickly as possible?
Thank you so much for that comment. Tavon.
Yeah, I mean, at first I didn't know what I was going to say here, but after hearing what Dr. Nick just said, how can our neighboring states be giving their residents $1,500 and we're just sitting here?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's not how. That's just my view about what would make a meaningful difference. These are still pilot programs, but sorry to interrupt.
Okay. Well, well then. So my biggest thing is, we're in a pandemic. We have a lot of hotels out here. A lot of hotels aren't being used anyway. So why can't we just put homeless people or people who are suffering into those hotel rooms anyway? I mean, it's not like I don't think that costs you money. If anything, I think it's just a waste of money that all those rooms are empty and nobody's able to use them. So I feel like, that's the easiest step. Just let them stay in the vacant hotel rooms.
Thank you, Tavon. Heather, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. I think the dependent college students should be included in the next stimulus package and these care funds, because I was a dependent student and I received nothing. So it was very hard to get by. And I had to try to get transferred to independent status, which is what I am now. And I've been doing a lot better. But I think that's a really big issue that needs to be addressed. There's too much talk and too little action.
You're spot on, Dr. Nick.
Yeah, well, I would say a couple of things. I'm afraid I'm going to A, get fired, and B, never be invited back to another panel. But I'll just say this. The city of Las Vegas received this is per the Associated Press, okay, received 119 million federal relief dollars, and 92% of that was spent on city employee payroll. Now, certainly we need to maintain solvency and pay our city employees so that they can provide services to folks who live here in the Valley. But it doesn't seem at face value that 92% of those funds should go to payroll. It seems without seeing substantially more transparency, it's hard to understand how that's a responsible disbursement of those funds. Okay. The other thing I would say is, I agree with Tavon that perhaps some of those funds could have been used to pay for housing people in vacant units and perhaps hotel rooms. That's something that's been tried in other states with some positive outcomes. So, just potentially that could have been another solution. I also think, look, a problem of this magnitude requires enormous innovation and commitment. And so it's going to require additional federal government resources. I mean, no matter how wisely we as a state spend our resources, it's simply not going to be enough when you have such vast unemployment and a hit to our kind of key economic engine, which is, of course, our gaming convention businesses. So we're going to need serious federal leadership and investment, and I hope we get that.
Thank you. I hope we get it too. Anyone else? Any other thoughts that maybe you didn't think of before that you want to add to the elected officials who want to know, and I hope are listening, to kind of just heed all the things that all the amazing ideas, right, that you've already thrown out?
I would like to add something. I feel like when it comes to money, it's just been a conversation, but nothing has been done. And once again, there's no excuses because we can make things happen. We're available. We have plans. We literally have a plan how to end youth homelessness. We just need to make it happen. And so I hope that our conversations actually turn into actions. And find me if you need that to happen.
Yeah, actually, I would just add one more thing that's kind of to reiterate the kind of core findings that we have from decades of homelessness research. And that is that the way you end homelessness is by providing housing. Okay, so it's not by doing other stuff, it's by providing housing. So of course you need to provide additional support, mental health support, substance use support, all that stuff that people talk about in the conversation with mental health. But what you really need, with homelessness, what you really need to do is provide housing. So that's the ultimate goal. We need to be able to provide enough affordable housing stock so that people can work one job and be able to afford housing. I mean, it's both that simple and that complicated.
Thank you, Dr. Nick. And I feel like, Tavon, I see you wanting to say something, and I want you to say it. But even you mentioning, everyone having access to housing and being able to work one job makes me think about the employment question, right? And talking about a living wage. Is there something you want to say more, about that? Because a lot of people, based on the current minimum, I'm not a panelist, so I'm going to be quiet, but Dr. Nick or anybody, right? I'll turn that right back over to you, because I don't want to get fired either.
Yeah, well, here I go. Look, the federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. That's $15,000 a year. How many minimum wage jobs do we expect people to have, let alone with families, to be able to afford to pay their rent? I mean, I would just encourage some of our elected officials listening to imagine what it would be like to try to live off of $7.25 an hour. By the way, that's working 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. Okay. Now, even if you were to double that to $15 an hour, which I think any rational person thinks is a good idea, any humane rational person thinks is a good idea, that's around 30 grand a year. So if you have a family, I would just encourage our folks in positions of power to try to imagine what it would be like to support your family on $30,000 a year here in Southern Nevada.
Well, I don't have a family. I'm a young man by myself, and I can barely support myself with that much money. With all my expenses, I have to get a transportation, pay my phone bill, pay my energy bill, pay my cable, pay my Wi-Fi, pay my rent. So even if I can't imagine somebody said in their heads like, "Hey, let's make 7.25 minimum wage." That's easy enough to live off on. Like I don't know. I just wish, like you said, like they could expand that and you know really see what people are going through. Like I know some people who are working two minimum wage jobs full time and they still don't make enough for their family. Like it's really bad, and I wish people can see that and like help these people who are working minimum jobs. It's not fair to them, and you're basically asking them to have a mental breakdown, working 80 hours a week and still not having enough to provide for you or your family.
Thank you, Tavon. Thank all of you. Yeah.
Can I add that the jobs where you make minimum wage are the exact jobs that are now deemed as essential. They've always been essential, but now people are saying that they're essential, which makes it even more so that there's not an excuse as to why they're making $7.25 an hour. I just wanted to add that. I also kind of wanted to go back to what Dr. Nick said about affordable housing. I think housing needs to be affordable and accessible. There are so many like hoops and barriers that people need to jump through just for the chance of getting housed, and that needs to go too. If we need to house people to end homelessness, it's actually house people.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move to the next question?
Yeah, I work 3 jobs. I'm barely able to pay the rent, the car, I can't even afford Wi-Fi, even if I could get it installed. So, there's a lot that needs to be done, and I second what everyone says here.
Yeah, I would just add one more thing. I mean, I think my co-panelists here have, again, done a brilliant job articulating what this looks like in terms of people's lived experiences. But I would just add a couple things. Sometimes people make the argument that, oh, we can't afford to raise minimum wage or it'll cause prices to go up, blah, blah, blah. There's simply no evidence to support that, no real systemic evidence to support that. I mean, wealth among the top 1% has gone up exponentially in the last decade, and yet we haven't seen catastrophic economic effects. So it's not clear to me why that wealth can go up among those folks, but if it were to go up in terms of wages among people working 2 and 3 jobs, it would somehow destroy the local economy. It just makes no sense. The other thing I would say is that if you are paying your employees below a living wage, you're asking the tax base in your city to subsidize your business because those people need to somehow get healthcare, get childcare, get transportation, etc. And those burdens then are shifted to the taxpayers. So it's not economically responsible to do that.
Thank you. Thank all of you. The next question comes from Dr. Chad Kingsley, the Regional Trauma Coordinator at the Southern Nevada Health District. Dr. Kingsley submitted a video question, so we're going to go ahead and play that now.
Hi, I'm Dr. Chad Kingsley from the Southern Nevada Health District, and this is my question for you. What have you learned from the pandemic that you can use for your future? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. A little feedback. Thank you for that question, Dr. Kingsley. Teresa, let's have you start here.
So this pandemic has taught me the importance of security, meaning housing security, and like financial security. Because that moment of when campus went, I don't know, it set me back so much that like it was just made everything difficult. And like now that school doesn't know, I don't know, and I'm just like lost and confused all over again. And I feel like I just got past that. And so I just now it just made me like, oh, I really need to secure my education. So like I don't have to go through this ever again. At least that's the hope. And also the value of routine. Like I mentioned before, you have to be very intentional about like what you do during the pandemic. So like before, I had a routine. Like I got up at 9, went to work and did what I had to do, came back at 5 and do what I had to do, and that was it. But now that I've lost that, I really want it back. So this the pandemic has helped me.
Thank you. Tavon.
Yeah, for me, I used to wake up, as crazy as it sounds, every day at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I used to do a 2 mile walk down, a 2 mile walk straight back up. And then on Sundays, I'll run for some reason. I don't know. But, not having that as a luxury, it really sucks. Like, I haven't realized that was a good way to kill 2 hours of my day, just walking. And, after that, during the day, I'll just eat some breakfast, go work out a little bit, play basketball, talk to people. Sometimes I'll have meetings. I'll have meetings for like 2 hours. Really get to know people. And not having that is really a toll because it kind of goes back to the last question. You really don't know what you have until they kind of strip it away from you. Like, even if I wanted to play basketball, I don't think I can. And, it's a health hazard. So, having something that you're used to doing every day and all of a sudden not having that no more, it's definitely tough on you. And you have to find ways to adjust.
Thank you, Tavon. Heather, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I've been taught by this pandemic patience, self-confidence, resourcefulness, and housing security. I never thought I would ever be homeless. If not for NPHY, I don't know where I'd be. I'm in an apartment right now, but if not for their ILP program, I would have been on the streets and I would have been failing college probably.
Thank you for sharing. Tyzikin.
I think I mostly learned about myself. Surprisingly, I've had a lot of time for introspection during this year and during this pandemic, and I've learned almost too many things about myself. But it's also kind of nice at the same time to know what I've healed from, what I still need to work on in order to get where I want to be, and then seeing how that's adjusted this year has been a lot, but I'll definitely be able to use that in the future. So,
Dr. Nick.
Yeah, I think, they're, on a, I guess kind of on a systemic level, I think we've all seen how the stress of this pandemic has exposed the fault lines in our society. And there are things that people knew about already. I think most of us knew about them, but they've really come into stark relief. And this is, again, the mental health, physiological health, economic disparities in our society that fall along racial and ethnic lines. I think that's just been made extremely clear. If it wasn't clear to people earlier. Then on a personal level, I think, particularly among my students, I've just seen enormous deep wells of resilience despite incredible challenges. I don't want to speak for my students, but they have really, many of them have, kind of shyly told me about a really, really profound personal challenges that they're experiencing while asking for like a 2-day extension on papers. These are people who are really working hard in the midst of personal tragedy and significant obstacles. So, I've just been inspired by that, but I'm also, I think it's not a surprise to anyone, really frustrated that we're not doing a better job supporting those folks. And it's not for lack of goodwill. I think, people don't get into public service or education to get rich. They do it because they want to provide services and be good public servants. And I think, it's hard. It's just hard to see that we are to some degree falling short. And yeah, I just think we need, to get creative and think about new ways to solve these problems, and also to demand accountability and an increase in resources.
Thank you. Thank you all. Any final thoughts to add to this question?
Well, one thing I've learned, us as a city, we're kind of dirty. I don't know if you guys noticed, but now they start to clean the door handles every hour. And my response to that is, well, why was we doing that before? Isn't that kind of nasty that you just don't clean the door handles, after every hour. A lot of people touch that. So, you know, as much as I don't like being cooped up and stuck in my house all day, at least I know when I leave my home, it will be a much cleaner place, and I and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Tavon. I mean, it really begs the question of, some of the things that we started doing post-pandemic that needs to continue on, right? Even once we fight this thing and get beyond it, not all of the changes have been negative changes. So we are going to go to the next question, which comes from Grammy-winning singer, songwriter Jewel. Jewel submitted a video question, so we're going to go ahead and play that now.
Hey guys, it's Jewel. I had the honor of visiting shelters with SANS. I definitely know the challenges of being homeless firsthand. It was an incredibly transformative time in my life. I remember how impossible it felt to break the cycle that I was in. It actually led me to developing tools to help me overcome my panic attacks and agoraphobia. Those are up at a website called jewelneverbroken.com. It's a free resource to anybody that wants to use it. But you guys are all experts in dealing with adversity, and I would love to know some of the tools that you guys have developed for yourselves to help you handle adversity.
That was a fantastic question. Thank you, Jewel. We also had another question before our panelists answer. We have another question that was submitted by the CEO of Mothership Coffee, Wani Romero, that is very similar, which is the following. How have you shown up for yourself when you felt the rug pulled out from under you this year? So the questions are around adversity and really just talking about your experience of you showing up for yourself when everything was kind of just pulled from beneath your feet. What kept you going? What kept you climbing? Anyone who wants to jump in can jump in.
Well, I've learned I need to work out longer. At first, it used to be 30 minutes. I pushed that thing up to 2 hours. I need to work out as long as possible. And to replace not playing basketball and football, it's gonna sound kind of funny, but I love to bake now. I don't know how you go from playing basketball to baking, but it happens. So now I love to bake banana bread, cookies. I tried to bake a pound cake the other day. It didn't turn out well, so and how it's helped me. It helped me realize that you can't dwell on the past. What you have to do for yourself is you kind of have to look what you like to do and not make it seem like it's a replacement, but make it seem like it's, make it seem like it's who you are now. Like we're not going to be the same person all of our lives. We all evolve. 12 years ago, I liked the color blue. It's okay with me now. My favorite color is red. It's just, you evolve as you get older. So just look at this as more of an evolving moment and not as an, down moment.
Thank you, Tavon. I love your perspective. Anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, my mental health has been awful this year. And it's been interesting how bitter I felt about it at certain points to kind of, like how strong do I have to be? Because I feel like I keep going from one traumatic situation to the next, and it's like everything is constantly falling apart. And like when are things not going to fall apart? But I've kind of obviously really had to work on that because I've been by myself this entire year, and I would completely fall apart if I didn't. But showing up for myself the way that I show up for other people has been a big thing, like being in my own corner the way that I'm in everybody else's corner, because I know that I show up for people like nobody's business, and I'll go out of my way to be there for other people. And I kind of had to turn that inward and be that for myself. So not to sound weird, but talking to myself and figuring out like, girl, what your needs are, how can I help you meet those right now? Like, you don't want to work out today? We don't have to work out today. We can just lay here. Whatever you need to do, we can do that. Kind of like being my own friend and approaching myself the way that I approach other people has been top notch.
Both of your response, it sounds like listening to a life coach, right? Being able to really just, one, be optimistic in the middle of adversity, in the middle of challenges and struggle. But then the opposite side of that, every day isn't going to be this good, perfect day. So like you said, Tyson, like waking up and being willing to extend yourself grace, being gentle with ourselves during a time when it's needed most. Heather, Teresa, yep.
Yeah, I echo what Ty said. Life is a constant fight and you got to roll with the punches. I've always been very self-motivated. My father would always tell me to never give up, and those words ring in my ears every single day. There's also this book by Navy SEAL David Goggins called Can't Hurt Me. I highly recommend it. It's a story of resiliency. He went through Hell Week 3 times, and his motto is get comfortable being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very inspiring.
Thank you. Teresa.
I love what everyone has said, and this pandemic has taught me that you have to make a choice. This pandemic is either going to like destroy you, or be the reason why things are harder, or you just make the choice, to fight it through. But what has helped me is just looking at the big picture, and knowing that like what I want to do in the future and what I have already overcome, and it's put in perspective like. I could do this, I could do this for myself, for what I want to do for people. And that has really helped me fight.
Thank you. Dr. Nick.
Well, look, I mean, I've, in comparison to so many other people, I am so privileged and lucky. I've had my job this whole time, my family's healthy. So I've really, really been incredibly fortunate, I guess I'm most fortunate because I've been quarantined this whole time with my wife, and she still most of the time likes me. So that's keeping my head up.
Thank you. And talking about keeping your head up, I mean, we've been talking a lot about, what needs to change, what leaders need to do and things like that. But at the same time, the people, whether it's organizations, it's services, it's our elected officials, they're human beings too. Right. So based on your experience, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to do? Right. As we're looking at this pandemic and facing it, you've talked about things that have helped you. What's that one main thing that's really helped you keep moving forward, keep pressing forward during this time that you want people to know, that you might want them to do and think about or try to explore, really just so that we can all remain positive and optimistic, because that's what it's going to take to overcome a lot of the challenges that we are facing as a community?
I would say compassion is like a huge thing. I don't really have another way to say this, but it's not all about you. We're all affected by this, okay? You don't have a monopoly on the detrimental effects of a global pandemic. And I think that while it's important that we are individuals and we have that individualism, I think a major problem is that that's everything for some people, is that it's their whole thing. It's all about just me, and then just everybody else can figure it out. I think this year especially is a time for that, especially moving forward. Like we're not even in recovery from COVID. We're still in the response to COVID. And I think one of the major reasons why we're in a response to it is because of individualism, because we're not thinking about everybody else and how it's affecting everybody else as much, if not more, than it's affecting us.
Thank you. So true. Anyone else?
Yeah, to comment on what you said, like I feel like that's big. Some people in the beginning of this thing, I was wearing my mask and I was called an idiot for wearing my mask. I was like, excuse me, I'm an idiot for protecting other people's life. Like you just, like Ty said, you can't be selfish. And one thing that I do every day, it doesn't matter how long it is, I listen to Katy Perry. For some reason, she makes me really happy. And you need to listen to, I'm not saying Katy Perry is your happy music, but she's definitely my happy music. So just find your happy music, I guess.
Thank you. It's important. Teresa.
I like to add that that we're at, in the day we're fighting the same battle. We have the same goals, and just remember that, and so it's easier to rely on your team member, or to connect and build that relationship so we can get this done. Like we're together. We should be a team fighting through this.
Thank you. Heather, Dr. Nick, anything that you want to add?
Speaking of Katy Perry, did anyone see that article where she said she called family who were Trump supporters and said that she loved them and she wanted them to be safe and happy despite the results of the election? I mean, that's compassion right there. And did you see the lashing she got out from people just because she said that? I mean, we need to stop being selfish and angry, and we need to start being more compassionate.
To answer your question directly, yes, I have seen it. She's my role model.
Thank you, Heather. Dr. Nick.
Yeah, I guess you know, sort of consistent with some of the other things we've been talking about. I think everyone is experiencing just a really high level of stress. You know, that seems to be the consensus. And so when you're experiencing a really high level of stress, it's very hard to practice non-defensiveness and to take, feedback. And I know that, personally for myself, I think it's, if not universally true, at least true for many of us. So, at the same time that we are ourselves personally experiencing a lot of stress, we're also being called upon to, as Tyson pointed out, practice compassion towards others and be open to receiving feedback about the changes that we need to make in order to better support our students, our constituents, etc. So I think that's a real challenge, and it's not going to be sort of a light switch or linear process where we're just going to be able to do it. I think, one of the things I study is mindfulness, and you're going to have to keep returning your attention again and again back to this idea of being receptive to feedback and practicing compassion. And, inevitably you're going to have defensive automatic thoughts and reactions to that. And so we just need to be mindful, meaning return our attention again and again to that goal of maintaining a compassionate outlook and taking in feedback about changes that perhaps we need to consider.
Thank you. Thank all of you. Our next question comes from Lori Jackson, Executive Director of National Safe Place. Lori submitted a video question, so we're going to go ahead and play that right now.
Hello, I'm Lori Jackson, President and CEO of the National Safe Place Network. What are the questions that you've been asking that no one seems willing or able to answer? Thank you.
Whoever wants to start.
Yeah, when is this pandemic going to end? And I hate when people say, oh, don't expect us to go back to normal. I mean, we can keep this hygienic stuff up. We can stay 6 feet apart. I like that. So someone doesn't have their cart right up against me. I mean, come on. But I think we should stay positive, stay optimistic, and stop living in the doldrums.
I got 2 questions.
Oh, I think you froze. And no, you unfroze. You were frozen?
My bad. Let me re-ask. Okay. 2 questions. If we know the importance of youth involvement, why aren't youth involved? And then for the youth that are involved or that happen to be involved, even though quite minimally, why aren't they being compensated for their time? This is a conversation that we've been having constantly this year with a lot of virtual webinars and meetings, and it's very interesting that we just keep talking about it. As Heather mentioned earlier, all talk and no action. Why are we actually doing it and applying the things that we keep talking about?
Thank you. Teresa.
I have a couple questions. My first one is, where are the youth? With shelters at half capacity, schools closed, drop-in centers closed, where are the youth? Also, where's the money that we keep talking about for the youth? Where is it?
Tavon.
I'm not good at asking questions, so I have to skip.
And that's fine. Dr. Nick, do you have one?
Those were great questions. I'm going to yield my time to my co-panelists on this.
Thank you all. Tyson, could we go back to your first question? Could you re-ask that question? Because I would like us to perhaps unpack that one a bit.
Of course. If we know the importance of youth involvement, why aren't youth involved?
Yeah.
If we've seen it's possible when youth are involved to the highest degree, I'm just trying to figure out why that's not a constant thing and why it's every once in a while. And when providers or community partners decide that it's important for us to be involved, knowing that our firsthand experience is really gonna make it happen in terms of ending youth homelessness.
Yeah. So what would your thoughts be, or just on why don't you think all, not most, but all organizations and entities and programs that are doing work for youth on behalf of youth don't have youth in the room at the table helping with the decision-making process, helping to implement policies and practice and things like that? Why do you believe young people aren't being invited in more?
I do have a theory, and it's that it makes people uncomfortable. If I could talk about adultism really quickly, which is kind of when somebody older than you doesn't take you seriously or trusts that you know what you're doing or believe you even because they're older than you and therefore they're wiser and they know what they're doing. But there is a difference between learned experience and lived experience. And I do want to point out that for a lot of the people in those spaces, they had to go to school to learn about this, and we had to actually go through this trauma firsthand to learn about it. So I definitely think that if anything, it makes them uncomfortable to have a young person be in the room and say, what you're doing isn't right. You actually shouldn't do that. Instead, you should be doing this. I'm not sure why you're not doing this and doing that instead. That's not going to work. I think it makes them uncomfortable to be wrong and to have somebody who's younger than them be in a leadership position alongside them.
Thank you for that. Anyone else have anything to add?
I'm glad you asked. No, it's okay.
Okay. I would just like to piggyback off of what Ty said and just say, there's a reason to be uncomfortable. If your goal is to eradicate youth homeless like ours is, then you shouldn't be uncomfortable. We're not here to to belittle you or to make you feel uncomfortable. We just want this change to happen because we know this firsthand. And that is all.
And that was enough. Tavon.
Right. Okay. Well, to comment on what both of y'all guys said, it's like Ty said, people don't like to feel uncomfortable. But it's also what Teresa said. I mean, we're just here answering a question. Like, why is us answering a question that you're asking directly to somebody who lived through the situation making you uncomfortable? Maybe instead of, maybe that's something you should, think on yourself instead of not inviting somebody, because obviously, if I'm not a doctor, so if I need help when I'm sick, I go to a doctor. So if you need help from a youth homelessness situation, why don't you go to a person who's homeless? It should be that simple to me.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just, I guess, oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to reference something that I believe it was Teresa said earlier about how either Teresa or Heather that we're on the same team. And this is part of that, of us being on the same team, is when we have input on things that are going to affect us and our peers directly. That's part of that. Sorry.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess the thing I would add is kind of, again, maybe more of like a meso macro level question, which is what are the core barriers to building more affordable housing units in the Valley? And how can we interrupt the pipeline from juvenile justice, jail and detention to homelessness? So we know that 50%, and by some estimates, 50% of youth experiencing homelessness have been in juvenile detention or juvenile justice system, jail or detention. And so that's a pipeline, and we need to figure out ways to interrupt that. we also know that a large percentage of those folks have experienced trauma. And so I think we need to figure out why it is that we are treating traumatic illness with incarceration.
Yeah, I just want to answer that. First thing, I just want to be blunt. The judicial system just doesn't work. You know, it's a very high probability if you go to jail, you're going to go back to jail. And my thing is, this is something my grandpa taught me. You can give somebody a fish, but if you don't teach them how to fish, once you leave them, they're going to starve. So, like, if somebody goes from robbing cars, to make ends meet so they can feed their family and then they can be self-sustained. If you put them back on the streets without a job, without a house, without any type of support, what do you think they're going to do? They're only going to do what they know how to do. So if you want to stop, youth from becoming criminals, you have to help them. You have to teach them. You have to make sure they're on the right path. You just can't give somebody something and expect them to know what to do with it.
I also think that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sorry. I also think that along with that restructuring, how we think of crime. Dr. Dick already mentioned this with mental health, substance abuse, like even homelessness, like what does crime actually look like? And why, like realistically, what does crime actually look like? And then why are we, according to that, punishing people instead of actually meeting them where they're at, helping them, giving them the support that they need?
Thank you. Heather, I know you had something to add.
Yeah, I'm wondering why the corporate mentality of treating employees, treating people as expendable and not essential still exists.
Hard questions that I hope every person listening is taking a mental note of and will actually hold themselves and hold their organizations accountable to really just grapple with. I think this conversation, we've heard a lot being mentioned about crime, juvenile justice. There was a question from the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada that wanted to know, can the legal community and public interest organizations, such as Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada, connect with homeless youth to help them with their legal needs? We believe there are homeless youth and youth on the verge of being homeless who have a wide range of legal questions about CPS, family law, juvenile justice court, landlord-tenant issues, immigration, etc. What efforts can be made to inform these youth that there are services out there to help them?
That's a tough question because, yes, there's people who want to help you, but looking at it not from my perspective, but from other people's perspective who've been told all their life, "Hey, I want to help you," but they've been screwed over. So it's hard to get somebody out of that mindset. Like, no, I can't trust this person. So really, what you want to do is, like I said earlier, people aren't a one size fit all. You have to know this person. You have to get to know this person. You have to know them and how they're going to react to you. You just can't expect them to come to you because, most youth who are doing that type of stuff, they don't trust adults, to be pretty blunt about it. That's really it.
Thank you, Tavon.
I'd like to add, sorry. Go ahead. To piggyback off of what he said, I think we should meet youth where they're at. For example, like I think of Feel Good Friday, which I don't really think it's happening right now, but that's just one example of like how we could meet youth and like just interact with them and just let them know that you are there to help them. So they don't have to like come find you and like go to a place they're unfamiliar with. Just meet them where they're at. So I think NPHY would be a great place to start.
Thank you.
I agree with that. To echo what both of y'all said, Tavon and Teresa, the lack of trust in general, but especially like I think with the criminal, obviously with the criminal justice system, a lot of lack of trust there. I would definitely recommend forming some sort of partnership with a trusted youth service provider and starting there. if a youth is receiving services from somebody that they trust and they see y'all constantly working together. I mean, I'm not saying that it's guaranteed that they're going to feel more comfortable, but they might look at you differently. Like that's definitely a better place to start than to just here's a flyer and come to our location.
Thank you. Heather, Dr. Nick, anything else that you want to add?
I mean, I agree with what everyone said. We need to go and see youth where they are and not just give them a flyer. We got to talk to them. We got to open up a discussion, and we need to build the trust. We need to build a foundation for a relationship there so that they will feel comfortable coming to these centers and get help.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that's been said wholeheartedly. I would just add, from kind of a trauma-informed perspective, that folks who experience complex trauma, and this is defined by repeated ongoing exposures to adverse experiences, particularly during critical developmental periods like childhood or adolescence. People who experience complex trauma, in addition to the traditional PTSD symptoms like avoidance, re-experiencing, etc., they also often experience emotion dysregulation and interpersonal difficulties, including problems trusting adult authority figures. And that should be self-evident if you consider the experiences that folks have had. So the notion that somehow youth or adults experiencing homelessness are service resistant because they don't do what an outreach worker wants them to do after one or two contacts is just not correct. So when someone has been exposed to this type of complex trauma, why on earth would they trust someone who meets them for the first time and not in a context of their choosing? So I think if you want to be effective at providing services and novel services, and I think, certainly the folks at MPHY and other service providers know this far better than I, you have to be ready to make several contacts and maintain and build a relationship. The same way that you don't just trust someone right off of the bat, even if you haven't had traumatic experiences, it requires, you getting to know that person, especially if they're asking you to change behaviors. So I just don't think that we should expect folks who've experienced trauma and homelessness to behave any differently.
Thank you, Dr. Nick. Anyone want to add anything to that?
Yeah, to piggyback what you're saying about trauma. So me, I've never committed a crime in my whole life. I know I have family who have. I've been in houses when police just came inside and physically abused people. So I'm traumatized by that. For some reason, I don't know why, I could be at a red light, driving my cousin's car. I have my license, the car is registered, and everything. I will literally start to sweat if I see them behind me, and that has nothing to do with me as a person. That's just trauma. Like, I'm scared of what can happen to me, and I don't know. It's just a way. Excuse me. It's just like people don't choose to have trauma. I mean, if anybody. Nobody's going to want to walk outside, see the police officer, and get scared. They want to feel safe when they see it. That's just something you don't choose to have. And I wish people can understand that. It's not, a cycle. It's not like, oh, he's just being dramatic. No, it's psychological, and that's how the brain works. If somebody hits you like 10 times a day, at some point you're going to stay away from that person.
Thank you, Tavon. Any other thoughts before we move along?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to add to that. If that I wanted to add would come back, I really kind of just wanted to say that, as Tavon mentioned earlier, the people that are supposedly there to help you, that are saying like, oh, these services are here for you, we're here to help you, and I'm referencing legal aid here, they can definitely be the reason why you have that trauma. Like they can just add to your trauma, because they, oh, we're here to help you, and then they don't help you, and that's like part of the problem. That's it.
Thank you.
I guess I would just add one more thing, and please, to my co-panelists here, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but one of the things that I've heard is that just getting initiated into service systems and going to access services can itself, especially in the beginning, be experienced as an additional stressor. It's hard to do that. You know, it's a change from your normal routine. You're having to navigate new relationships with new people, understand what is just genuinely a complex service system, fill out paperwork, get documents. So, you know, accessing help is not easy, even when you have really well-meaning providers and outreach workers. That in and of itself can be experienced as an additional stressor when you're trying to navigate transportation, housing, food, other stuff that's going on in your life. So I think we need to understand the broader context of people's lives when we're providing services or doing outreach. Does that seem accurate to you guys, or am I off base with that?
Yeah. No, it's definitely accurate. It's a really exhaustive process to be asked, like you, as soon as you go in there, you're asked so many different questions, and often like a lot of the questions are the same question, they're just worded slightly differently. And if anything, it deters you from even wanting to get help from that provider.
Also, I like to add that like going through that process makes it real. For example, like you could you could spend night at your friend's house, like for the whole semester or for the whole school year. But the moment you sit down and write that paper, though, and they say like, "Oh, you're gonna spend the night at your friend's house, you're couch surfing," you're like, "Oh, okay, this is really real. Like I'm not in the stable situation like I thought it was." And so it kind of just hits you all over again, especially when they ask you to tell the story or go through like the whole process again. So it's yeah.
First, these are some good questions you're asking here. Second, yeah, like to echo what Teresa said, like you don't. It's crazy, but if you live your life one certain way your whole life, you don't know it's weird until you get a stack of papers in front of you and somebody writing down like, interesting. Like, what do you mean? I thought me staying with my friend 3 nights a week is normal. Like, you don't know something is not normal until someone tells you it's not normal. So that's all I really want to add. That's all.
Thank you, Tavon. Any other? Okay, if not, we definitely want to thank everyone who submitted a question. Your questions definitely contribute to a fruitful and enlightening discussion, but we've spent the entire panel, right, answering questions from other people. I don't want this moment to be all talk and no action. So as a final question, I want to know from each of the panelists, what is the main thing? Maybe it's something that you didn't get a chance to say. Maybe it's something that you already said that you really want to echo and make sure they hear you on. What is the one thing you want the attendees to know? And what is the one thing you want them to do?
Compassion. I mean, you never know what somebody's going through. You know, you could be at a grocery store, you could accidentally bump into somebody, or somebody accidentally bumped into you. You know, that person could be having the worst day of their life. Their mom could have died. You know, you don't know what somebody's going through. So just don't always jump to, hey man, why'd you bump into me? Just be like, oh, excuse me, sorry. Like you don't have to always, I guess, seek conflict. Like you never know what people are going through, so always treat people how you want to be treated.
Thank you, Tavon. Anyone else?
I would just like to say again, like how open I am to like make things happen, to be a part of your team, so we can accomplish like our goals together. I don't want there to be no excuses, so I am here. I could even say my email if needed, but yeah, y'all can find me.
Thank you.
I would just want to say that you can't ignore a problem and expect it to go away. You actually have to do something sometimes. And as Teresa said, we're here, we're ready to be on the team, include us on the team, and let's stop just talking about this and let's actually do something. Because we know that there are solutions. There's a solution to pretty much everything. Let's actually put those in motion.
Thank you. Heather, Dr. Nick, any final thoughts?
We need patience, we need better advocacy, we need action. And going back to the last question, CPS came to my house and told me that my living situation wasn't normal because my mom wasn't around and it was just me and my father. And I told her everyone has a different normal. So I think that, advocates need to understand that and try not to re-traumatize people. And we also need to really get up and get active and not just have these meetings once a year and do nothing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank my co-panelists for their ideas and insights. I think it's incredibly valuable. I would just add that, there are a few things we know will work to solve the problem of youth homelessness and homelessness in general. And that is having adequate, affordable housing, paying people a living wage, and providing trauma-informed social services. Those are the things that will end youth homelessness. And I would just add, getting somebody into housing, permanent or long-term housing, that is often just the start, especially if people come from a background of trauma or complex trauma. It can take a year in a stable environment to just start to re-regulate emotionally and physiologically. So, the expectation that, after a year or 6 months in long-term housing, folks are suddenly going to be able to take care of all of this stuff on their own without support, it's simply not the case. So people need to understand that complex trauma has long-lasting effects, and they can be treated. But part of what needs to happen is that people need to have ongoing, sustained support beyond the 1-year mark. So affordable housing, living wage, trauma-informed social services.
Thank you all. And we have one final question. For the attendees, you've heard our amazing panelists. They've given you many, many calls to action and things that we need to be thinking about, things that we need to be doing. But what you also heard was hope, optimism. So going with that, the final question that was just submitted is, what do you hope, or what is your hope for 2021?
I hope that we don't stay stagnant or go back to what we had pre-pandemic. I think that, or I've noticed that a lot of people are really just, I really wish everything would go back to normal. But the problem was normal. Like, if we could abolish normalcy and instead strive for something better, that's what I want. Because what was normal is the reason why we're here today, and that's a problem.
Yeah, for me, kind of like what I said, like we have to adapt better. That's my hope, that we all adapt better and we all find our situations more happier. That we can, you know, we can actually look ourselves in the mirror and we don't have to go outside to be okay. I hope that everybody can find inner peace. That's what I hope for.
For 2021, well, next year is legislative session, so I hope that we see policy that protect and guide youth out of homeless situations. Hope we see more programs that are fully funded and that are built to help homeless youth. But ultimately, I just hope that change actually happens.
My hope is for 2021 and beyond, let's end youth homelessness.
Yeah, so again, even though I think I can maybe come across as critical, I am hopeful. I am hopeful. To quote Dr. King, I do think that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And we now have, I think, a more informed conversation going on in our country than we ever have before. So it's not automatic that the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice. It takes our vigilance and commitment. But I think, the conversations are happening. And as my co-panelists pointed out, we need to translate those conversations into action for affordable housing, a living wage, and trauma-informed social justice and social service outreach.
Thank you all. My hope is that every attendee who I believe sees themselves as a youth advocate has been reminded this entire conversation that it is blasphemous to call yourself a youth advocate without advocating for youth and young adults, that you are serving, to be in the room, to be at the table, to be alongside you, partnering with you, and being compensated for their contributions as we continue to move this movement forward and really work to end youth homelessness, not just in Nevada, definitely in Nevada and throughout the state, but across this country and across the world. I want to thank Teresa. I want to thank Heather. I want to thank Tavon. I want to thank, why am I, excuse me, coughing, finally. Tysican, and then Dr. Nick, for their contributions, for your thoughts, for your bravery, for sharing your stories, and for challenging each of us, including myself, to step it up so we can do what I know we're capable of doing. I'm going to turn it over back to Arash to wrap up our conversation for today.
Wow, what an amazing and insightful conversation. First of all, thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today, and to our moderator, Yori, for bringing it home. To all the young advocates and leaders on the panel, I want to say thank you for your resiliency and the incredible insights that you're providing for everyone. Like Yori said, I'm learning too. And you all inspire me every day. And Dr. Nick, thank you as well for your amazing intelligence and insights and advocacy on behalf of our sector. And for the panelists, it's tough being in a virtual format to really appreciate how well and how much you engaged the crowd. The chat box during your panel was just blowing up the entire time. And I just found one that collectively sums everything up. It says, "I can't find the words to express the impact of your collective words and wisdom this morning." So on behalf of everyone that attended, thank you. And if you could hear it, there'd be cheering, there'd be whistling, there'd be all kinds of noise being made to express everyone's gratitude and how motivated they feel by your words and insights. The point of this panel was to ensure your voices are part of the conversation and are uplifted, and that your ideas are prioritized. Because like many of the youth said today, they know what they're talking about. They are the true experts. Someone can study homelessness, but living it and understanding what to do about it because you have lived it makes all the difference in the world. And we can all do a better job of uplifting youth voice and making sure they're integrated into conversations like today, and that leads to action. So we've heard from youth and how they feel and what's still missing, what some of the needs are on the table, and some of the ideas and solutions that they have that we want to synthesize and try. Now, Teresa brought up the legislative session, and Dr. Nick brought up some things about direct cash payments. And I just want to say that I want to double down on that for those listening who are either elected officials or in a position to influence policy at the local, regional, or state level. Affordable housing is a right, not a privilege. We do need real living wages in Nevada, throughout our country, but especially in Nevada. And we do need to double down on more accessible trauma-informed services. As an example of that, I want to highlight that in the state of Nevada, we have already made direct cash payments to foster youth from the ages of 18 through 21. And I think that we can use that model and hear what the youth are saying today and wondering of where all these resources are to help them when they hear all this cash coming into our state or our city or county coffers. I think that there's something to do where we could take immediate action, maybe at the next legislative session, to see what we can do to provide these type of benefits and ensure that homeless youth are at least getting the same benefits that other youth are already getting in our state, as we all figure out how to wrap our heads around and continue innovating ideas and bringing forward solutions to help with this COVID-19 pandemic. Again, thank you to all the panelists and moderator for your honesty, advice, and your perspectives. You've given us a lot to think about, and we will be synthesizing a lot of this and making sure it's shared and available post panel and post summit. But please don't let the conversation fade away. Join us on the summit's Facebook discussion groups to discuss and brainstorm how we can apply what we've learned today to our organizations and sectors. And if you haven't already, please check out our summit attendee page at mphy.org/summit20/attendee for a link to our Facebook discussion group, code of conduct, videos from elected officials, and other resources. If you are a licensed social worker and if you'd like to get social work CEUs for today's panel, there is now a link, a survey link in the chat for you to fill out. And again, on behalf of the Movement to End Youth Homelessness in Southern Nevada, everyone that's helped put this together, all our attendees, our moderator, and our panelists for today, we thank you for joining us. And we can't wait to see you back here next Friday, November 20th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We're going to have another extremely and critically important discussion, our second and final panel of Summit 2020, which will be Youth Homelessness and Anti-Racism. So thank you all for being a movement to end youth homelessness in Nevada and helping a movement fight back. And we will see you all next week.